All right, Christian, this topic came up with us while we were talking on Threads, the topic of flowing versus forcing in terms of working, creating, things like that, because it's so important. So many of us get into this grind mode, or we're forcing and forcing things and stressing ourselves out. And it's just like, it doesn't work for the long term. And there's better ways to go about working and creating. So, what's your philosophy on flowing versus forcing in terms of work, creativity, everything like that?
I think that you have to go on both sides of the coin to like figure out your own definition. Because I think experience kind of trumps everything. And that's kind of the boot camp that I fell into. Um, I I wanted to achieve something in my life. I wanted the success that you see on Instagram and everything like that. Uh, and I heard all these contradicting, you know, successful people. You have the spiritual camp who's like go with the flow, and then you have the other side of the camp, self-development, success, money driven. That's like you have to work, work, work. And I tried both when I launched the company iMaze, which we can get into later. Um, but I came to the realization that for me, I think it depends on your definition. But for me, I think, especially with my art, I think flow is just will get you there as long as you take inspired action at the same time. What about you?
I've been down both paths a lot as well. And even with certain things, I kind of default to that forcing mode. I think it's like an ancestral thing that has to do with like work and even around money. It's like I default to just trying really hard, and like it's almost like it's my dad's energy because he's like a hard worker. You got to try really hard, work really hard for everything. So that like it almost like I fall into that pattern when it comes to certain things. But then I've done so much work on myself and mindfulness that I'm able to be present a lot of the time, not all the time, and get into more of a flow.
Mhm.
And but it's always been a balance, and it's been a hard journey because I will default into forcing, trying so hard, only with certain things. Have you found that it could be different with different things, like let's say your visual art versus some other kind of work? Have you found that to be the case?
I For my art, everything is intuitive. You know, I think I just have like a wild art style where, it's almost like I get as present and mindful as possible, and I clear my mind, absolute stillness in my mind, and I just create because I think all creativity comes from that place of stillness within. I don't think it's something necessarily you're just like born with. Maybe you have like a more sensitive antenna to that sort of thing, but um for me it's just I get in the flow and ideas come to me and I decide, this this shape goes here, I see a face here, and the art sort of just creates itself. I have no idea what I'm gonna come up with next. And it just there's something in my iPad at the end of the sitting every time. So that's sort of my process.
Do you do anything in particular to help you get into that state of creation and inspiration?
So I've been meditating for like 12 years. Um and that allowed me to to have that feeling of what presence feels like, and which I think is the core of this whole thing, like just getting rooted in being, because we're called human beings, not human doings, and we sometimes get lost in the whole doing aspect. I know I have, and that's what I mean when I had to to discover both sides of the coin. Um, yeah.
I like that idea of like knowing what presence feels like. That's so key. And that's such a good reminder because that's a way that I've found like really beneficial for myself to remind myself like I know what it feels like to be in the state that I want, to be into flow state or presence or something like that. So that's a really good point. And also what I wanted to ask you is have you found that you get into more of that force or grind mode with other things besides your like is there anything in your life where you fall into that pattern more?
So I have like in the back of my mind that, there's times of just, I don't know, like weakness, I guess, where I'm just like, where I second guess my beliefs about everything. And I'm like, you know, I see all these, like I said before, I see all these successful entrepreneurs saying like, you got to work, at least 65 hours to be an entrepreneur a week. And, there's times where I get in that mindset, like I just have to do more, do more, do more. But I think out from the being, like doing actually occurs naturally. And that's what I realized. Like intuitively, you might be like, all right, this is the next step on my journey or the next task that I have to do. And then I feel like it'll come naturally when the time is right, and just having that trust um, as you move along your journey.
And what do you think those people like that, like let's just say the personal development entrepreneurs that's like go, go, go. What do you think they have right? And then what do you think they might not be considering?
Yeah, so I think what they have right is like obviously you can get there because it works for them, just taking action. But Eckhart Tolle, I just remember something he said that stuck with me, and that was just um, like you you'll work yourself and you'll start feeling like unhappy with the way you feel and the energy you put out in the world because you'll be like stressed all the time. And that's what I got. Like I became very extreme, just like trying to do too much, but it made me less balanced. It like um made things worse with my relationship with my wife and things of that nature. Um and eventually I was just like, yeah, but maybe it'll take longer if I go with the flow, but I'll end up being a lot happier. And I feel when I am in flow, I feel just content with everything, and you know, I feel a lot happier. And things still happen, you know, like all the time. So I think developing patience is a big part of it. I think that's one of the hardest parts, at least for me. What do you think about patience?
Yeah, I think patience is a superpower. It's so important, and most people lack it. And that's one of the missing keys because I was thinking like what kind of objection would someone who's in that like hyper yang go 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 mode, what
Mhm.
objections would they have to going with the flow? And they would be like, well, it doesn't work. I'm not getting results,
Mm.
like those kind of things. And patience really is that missing ingredient because with patience, first of all, you'll be content here and now. And there's also something like magical and magnetic about patience where things just start happening. Once you let go of that expectation of like it needs to happen now in this way and you're patient, things just start flowing to you and you become more magnetic. Have you found that to be the case too?
Yeah, exactly. Like just recently, I've been, for a while, I took a back seat in that like go, go, go mode because I just decided to trust life. And I was putting off applying to like a bunch of tent fairs where I sell my art, t-shirts and phone cases and everything like that. And there was a time where sort of like being and action emerged, and I decided to jump right into applying to some all at once. And without even knowing, I applied to 3 fairs, and I didn't know this, but they just happened to be one right after another, each weekend. And, you know I just had, like, a lot of coincidences happen with just meeting the right people. Long story short, I ended up on, a billboard with my art for one of the shows, and Uh, I was thinking about creating a book that merges art and mindfulness, which I already wrote the content for. And I just got in a conversation with my dad before the day before the show, and then this guy came up to me, and he was like an author, and he's been in the industry for like 30 years, and he had the exact same idea. So so that stuff happens a lot when you decide to trust the flow of life. And, there's great authors who are kind of like my role models in the landscape of spirituality, like Eckhart Tolle, like I mentioned before, and like Michael Singer, who just absolutely trust the flow of life. But I think you can get so lost in the being, um, that you can just get, like, blissed out on that and, like, live in a cave or something. So but I'm the type of person who likes to blend action with being.
Yeah. For you, how did you get to that place of trusting the flow of life? Like before you got into taking those opportunities with the shows, with the fairs for your art, like what did you have a realization or what got you into that place of trust?
A feeling.
Mm,
Yeah. Uh, I had, like, a spiritual awakening, and I that sort of just changed things, where I realized, as cliche and how many times people have heard it, like, I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. Um, I really felt that, and I was a squash pro for a while, which is a sport if you've never heard of it. And just as far as like trusting myself and the way things unfolded naturally, and I could sort of just it became like a feeling. Um, and I learned to like trust that because like like I said before, it's not always the fastest result, but it's it's leading you towards growth and a better self and like a better self or like human being. Just kind of like molding your character so you could handle your dream.
mm.
That's what I believe.
And what kind of worldviews or beliefs do you think are the most ideal for allowing yourself to get into that flow and surrender to that flow?
I think I think you just have to like experience it for yourself, because when you experience it firsthand, that feeling, like I just explained, becomes your belief, and that's all the evidence you need. That's why, like, so many people believe and have different beliefs because they've all experienced different realities, and one is not more right than the other, but there are some overlapping characteristics.
That's good. That's good. That's a gem right there. Um, Now you just made things click for me. Do you feel like when you're in that mode of like forcing, and I'm saying the general you, when
Yeah.
people are in that mode, do you think it means that they're just too caught up in their head and when they're flowing and in that surrender, they're more embodied? Do you feel like that's the case?
Yeah, I think it has to do with, a sense of control. Like, when you're forcing things, you wish that you had this sense of control over life, but like you can't predict what's going to happen or what you're going to say in the next like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, right? Um, so yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and a big realization that I had today was like the ability to confront like the grand mystery of life and just how mysterious and how slippery reality is, and to try to like grab a hold on it or think you know everything. It's just like an ego coping mechanism to try to control and be safe.
Yeah.
And with what you're saying about like that trust and surrender, it allows you to greet that mystery and dance with that mystery instead of trying to control everything.
Yeah, and I think by surrendering, even though a lot of people don't like that word, I think it ultimately gives you a little more control, which it's like the opposite. And things start to happen in your favor more. So it's interesting. The more you let go, the more control you gain in a sense. Even though, like I said before, you don't really control shit.
Yeah. How I view it is like maybe you could call it your soul or higher self or God or whatever, the flow of creation. You're aligning with that. So you kind of have your ego doesn't have control, but you do on that higher level. It's very difficult to describe, but that's how I view it. You're
I
aligning with that higher power.
Yeah, I view it the same way. And I heard this good like description of a higher power. It's almost like your higher power is on top of like, a cliff or like a hill, and it's overlooking kind of like everything that's going on below. And of course, you're down there below trying to figure life out. And you know, just listening to yourself, your intuition, sometimes we go against that. Maybe either because we're unconscious in that moment and we don't recognize it, or because we deliberately don't want to do that thing or we're scared to do that thing, and we end up falling in a ditch, but our higher power is like, you can go that way, but I suggest going this way. And I've by falling in so many ditches in my life, I've come to the realization that like it's better to just trust the ride.
Yeah. And you mentioned a couple times like it's a feeling.
Mm.
What does it feel like to you, that deep trust? Like, is it a bodily sensation or an emotion? What does it feel like?
Feels like presence, like contentment,
Mhm.
and you have all these little signs that people or pointers that people throw out, like alignment, stuff like that. Um, but that's just like when you're present and you're just taking inspired action um, from being. Yeah.
That's a good segue because you said inspired action. So, what inspires and what inspired you, even in the beginning, to start creating your art?
So like I said before, I had this. I wanted to be someone so bad. Um, growing up, I felt invisible in a lot of ways, and I just wasn't the person that I wanted to be. Um, and you said what inspired me
Mhm.
to do art and stuff? Is that what? Okay.
Yeah.
Um, and I think I just really got into like self development and everything, and that led me to read a book in college, Malcolm Gladwell's book, one of Malcolm Gladwell's books, and they talk about the 10,000 hour rule, and I, that kind of messed with my brain a little bit, to be honest. Like I have to commit to 10,000 hours or something. I better find that. So I like got into like all these different things and changed my major a bunch of times. Um, and I really couldn't figure it out, but one day after trying a million things and stressing about it, which was all self-inflicted, I realized, I asked myself, what was something I liked to do when I was younger that I was just drawn to, around the age of 12, which they say when you're doing that, that usually is tied to like kind of your purpose in a lot of ways, and in a lot of cases, not every case. Um, so I remember that I used to just draw and like listen to audiobooks and stuff. Uh, and now and then I picked up drawing, and friends and family were giving me like a lot of recognition, just enough to keep going and like motivate me to keep going. And I was growing on Instagram. Um, and I just kept at it because I liked doing it. And then I went from writing like just like little jokes with my art, and that kind of led into and transitioned into like spirituality and mindfulness with my art. So I tied the two together. So it just connected in that way. And you can relate that to like the audiobooks, which is kind of like the reading and writing portion, and then the art, which is what I like to do when I was younger.
Nice. And I've gone through your Instagram and you have so many posts. It's like it's like almost endless. So you've been really consistent. Did that come from the 10,000 hours or was that something else involved in like helping you be that consistent?
Who knows where it came from? I'm just like, my brain is more motivated than I'm putting out, even though it's a lot. Like I could put out more, but I came to a point where I just want to have like equilibrium in my body, and just you know I feel like when you live presently, there you get stressful moments because you're growing and you have your challenges, but it's not like a toxic stress that you're just like overdoing it, and just like I said before, just putting that out into the world, and everything just feels more like aligned and right.
Yeah. And you also said something that I resonate so much with. You said you felt invisible a lot in your life, and I
Yeah.
felt the same way. And the past few years, I've realized like that feeling of invisibility combined with some other beliefs like not feeling good enough and things like that, it like drove me to work out, to be fit, to do everything personal development related. Like I had to develop myself in every way to create so much and produce so much. But eventually, it's almost like the more I did it and the more I grew, I started switching to a different fuel source. So it became less about like I need to be seen in an egoic way into more of like a pure inspiration. It's almost like it started out like I was burning dirty fuel to push me forward, and then I switched to a cleaner fuel source as I developed myself. It's a weird phenomenon that happens. It's like the people who start working out just to get girls or something like that, and then they realize they really love it and they get more present with themselves as a result. So, have you found that too with yourself? Like, was it like something to prove or to show people that you were developing yourself and then you got more inspired? Or did it start with like pure inspiration?
Yeah, it started it started with like the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I don't think I ever finished it, but I read the first couple
Either.
chapters, and in college that was just like life changing for me. One of the things was just like, you know, essentially like, you know, give people like sincere compliments and just being like a good person basically. And like I went to like all guy schools my entire life. And you just don't do that as much as or you just don't learn to do that as much. Um but it started there, and and then yeah, like I learned I just wanted to improve myself, got into uh just stuff with like women, like trying to learn about that because I was at an all guys school. And then like later the focus became more about like serving the universe in a sense. So it has shifted over the years.
Nice. Yeah. That definitely happens. I'm curious, like, what does your process of creation look like? Like you said, you use an iPad, I think. So what's your process for creating art?
So I sit down and then I get as present as possible to like the moment. I have no inclination of what I'm gonna draw or put on that digital canvas, but I start out with a blank screen and I just draw like maybe one line and I just sort of branch out from there and until I see shapes and faces and I kind of just go with the flow of things to be honest. And you know, during it, I have like intuitive nudges about certain directions to go or like ideas that come, or like maybe I am inspired by someone's art that I saw on Instagram later. I'm like, that would be cool to add here. Um, and it's just a process. But the interesting thing is like when you put out a lot of work and trust the process, I have a rule that I have to like finish everything that I start, and I usually do it in one sitting, not always. Um, for digitally, it's usually the case. Um, and over time, you realize you start to build your portfolio of like all these like little creative experiments that you tried, and they accumulate over time and develop into your personal style. Um, and that's been that's been really cool to see.
How would you describe your personal style?
I can't label it, but if I had to, it would be, well, first of all, I'm an intuitive artist. A psychic actually told me I should go by that. Um, I only tried that once, but anyways, that's a different story. Um, and then it's kind of like abstract blended with cartoon in a way, or some even say anime. Even though it's, I don't really consider it like traditional anime. It just looks very like some of the figures just like look very cartoony. And that was when I grew up. I liked drawing cartoons before I took like a giant break, um, and picked it up in 7 years ago.
And what have you learned with like sharing your art? Because it's a whole different experience when you put things out to the world, like either just on social media or selling it. Like it, you learn so much and it brings so much up like of your own beliefs and things like that. So what have you learned by sharing it, selling your art, all that stuff?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like I feel like the message, like I mentioned, like I tie the mindfulness stories with the art. You know, usually I, I don't know why, but when I'm at like 10 fairs and stuff, I always say to the people, like, whichever one you're drawn to, like visually, just like read the back and see if it resonates. And almost every time it resonates with them in like a unique and powerful way that like relates to them very strongly. And people have said like that they can't imagine my artwork without the words, or the words without the artwork. So that was one of my favorite compliments that I've gotten several times from people.
What do you write on the back of them?
Just things that I've learned um, since like my spiritual journey started. And it's honestly, that's also intuitively intuitive. So it just, you know, whatever I feel in the moment, that's sort of what I write when I just stare at the piece for a little bit. And start writing something and then just tie it with the artwork in
Mhm.
some way, either visually or like what the character is going through or something like that.
So you kind of use your art as a prompt for the writing, right?
Exactly. I
Huh.
love that.
Yeah. And even like with the emergence of AI and stuff like that recently, it's been causing me to view consciousness differently. So I view things like that. Like you look at a piece of art and it inspires writing. That's like a prompt for your soul. That's how I view that. So it seems like that's what you're doing, like prompting your soul to flow in terms of writing. Do you have a kind of writing process that's different from your uh visual art process?
A lot of it is just like stream of consciousness and then like just tying it together so it makes more sense. Um, but Eckhart Tolle has influenced me with that because he said, he just basically started writing in a notepad just like what came, and that developed into The Power of Now and his other books. So, but like we talked about earlier, like there's a strong sense of being aligned with action when taking it. So, um, for a while, going back to what we were talking about before, like I would just, force getting the drawings done, just one after the other. But I think the drawings were a lot weaker than when um, I was just feeling more aligned when I was drawing.
Yeah, I've noticed that too with things that I create. If I rush and force it, it's almost like there's less potency. Even if it's not like, even if you can't tell like on the surface level, like quality wise, there's just like not as much potency, maybe on an energetic level or something like that. It's like when you're very present and in that beingness, you infuse more potency into everything you do.
Yeah, I think I think that's just sort of like your connection with the universe in a way, and what wants to come through will come through.
Mhm. Do you have any other practices that help you like live live a more inspired, creative life? I know you said like meditation. Anything else or any specific kind of meditation that you do?
So I got a MBSR, Mindfulness Based Stress Reduction teacher training level 1 at Brown University. It's like part of their continuous studies program, and that was really powerful because um, you do things like 5-day retreats for part of the program where you can't talk to anyone for 5 days and you have to meditate 12 hours a day, and that that's sort of the basis to it all. But um, I think when you sort of like live presently, uh, all things like all things start to happen.
Yeah, it really is that simple.
Yeah.
Like we overcomplicate things like you see this in the personal development world. Like you need to take a cold shower or an ice plunge and then do this and do that and do that when it really is just about like coming back to presence as often as you can. That's like the ultimate thing to do.
That's it. That's the only thing you have to be concerned about, and then the rest will take care of itself. And in between that, you'll have like this ride of like emotions where you just like your ego might be tugging at you, and whatever you have to go through the challenges, but just trusting the process. And life has the light and the dark, and just like overcoming that is part of every human being experience.
True. And when you're present, you allow yourself to integrate both sides. Like you don't get into that mode of either suppressing or repressing your darkness or running away from it. You're able to like accept it all with love and integrate it fully in the moment, in that beingness. So, yeah, I think that's it. Did anything else come up for you that you wanted to elaborate on?
Uh, Not really. I think one of the things is just like not being so hard on yourself.
Mm.
You know, um, success in this culture. You know, success is just like makes us feel like that's the only way we can be accepted in our country, the U.S. And that's just not the case. Like, I think the more rooted you are in being and presence, maybe not right at this time, but eventually just by being present and going with the flow, like you'll just grow over time and you know people will see that and you'll see that. And I think the most important part is not really about other people, but like the respect that you give yourself, because only you know what you've been through, and like only you can really judge yourself, not even your parents or your wife or husband, your partner. You're the only one who gets to decide like how you're doing in life. And you don't need to put so much pressure on yourself to be someone. Like I'm a firm believer that everyone has like a calling, a destiny, and if we follow our intuition, like we talked about the higher self, we get like little clues about the next right step to take. And as Steve Jobs says, like the dots only connect to looking backwards. you know like I'm doing all this stuff, but like I only know the next step ahead of me. I don't know the rest of my life, and that's all I can take. And I'm trusting that unknown. That's just the path that I decided to take. And a lot of people go after um, sort of like the easy, safe path out of usually because they're scared or that's what everyone else is doing. Uh, but I don't think that's the safest path. I honestly think the safest path, if you go all the way, is listening to your intuition and taking the path of the unknown. Because, Jim Carrey's father, for instance, um, like lost his job later in life, and it taught Jim that like you could fail at doing what you hate, so you might as well do what you love.
Yeah. Damn, that was good. You just went off and dropped like so much gold right there. Like I had some feeling that you had something else to say. So I'm glad you said that. So to wrap up, where can everyone find you, your work? Where are you most active online? Anything like that?
A good place is to start out is on Instagram. It's EYE_maze. I picked that name for my company, iMaze, because it's about finding your I in the maze of life, like letter I, even though this is spelled EYE. And and then I just got into threads and I spend most of my time on there. And I also have a website called imazinart.com, where I sell my artwork, and each of my pieces comes with like a little mindfulness message or a fortune cookie, I guess you can say. And yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Nice, awesome. I'll put those links in the description on YouTube and wherever else this goes too. So thank you so much for coming on, Christian. And you
Awesome,
gave
Steve.
me a bunch of realizations.
I hope so. You did too.
All right. Thank you so much. Take care.
Take care, man.